Want to know what the movers and shakers of New Hampshire's performing arts are thinking? Welcome to New Hampshire Unscripted with your host, Ray Dudley.
And I had to put it on, I learned the hard way, I had to put it on Do Not Disturb as well because someone calls and all of a sudden it stops recording.
It stops.
I don't mind if someone calls, but it just stops recording.
It's funny, too, that, we're talking about that in filmmaking now in the day and age that we live in. I actually have it in my car. I got, this little Osmo Pocket thing that plugs into the side of your cell phone, and then I have a bracket for it that puts it on a little tripod, and it shoots, 4K video on that with a nice little camera. I use it to film my son's baseball, basketball, soccer games now, and it's hysterical. I don't have to bring a ton of gear, and then I'm not the intrusive dad where, Dad, can you not bring the camera?
So way down on my list is,
which is funny.
Way down on my list, and I do want to get to it because I do.
All right.
I do. I want to talk to you about tech and how it's influenced what you do, and whether you think it's for the better or the worse, as opposed to old school. You don't have to get into it now.
We can start from the bottom up.
So,
but if you've got a list, which scares me, that I'm listable.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. You're not very listable. Your IMDb is almost nil.
Really?
Yes. You have you've done a lot, but there's not a lot. You're like out there for a director for 4 things. You've been a producer, an editor, a writer, but it's all like 1 or 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. You're a ghost, baby. You're a ghost.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
It is what it is. I mean, the thing is the stuff that I've directed are long documentaries, you know what I mean? And then in a couple of shorts, and then, I got asked to act and stuff, so I ended up acting in a few things, and then you write a few things, and I don't know. And then, to begin with, 9 years ago is when it all started, and I kind of ended up doing it on a whim.
Okay, let's start there. 9 years ago, what happened? What changed?
2008, 2009, I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, home of the New Hampshire Film Festival, and full-time single dad, working, musician prior to that, and just have always been a huge fan of film and music and art, in a lot of ways, and kind of went to my first film festival and ended up going to the film festival as a guy who was interested in just films. Now, I didn't want to watch every film. Like some people go, I want to watch this. And this. Like, I just wanted to learn about the process. And so the great things about, New Hampshire Film Festival, especially early on back in the day, is it really, really, really catered towards having filmmakers there and having a lot of panels. And the panels were geared to, kind of educating you and whether it was talking about, my favorite one, and I always reference it, it was called From Script to Screen, and it really was kind of like, hey, you write a script, do this, you do this, you do this, and how to make your first, how to make a film. And,
so up until that point, I don't mean to jump in.
No, go, jump away.
What was you had no background in filmmaking at that point? You just all of a sudden had a curiosity?
My background was I watched a ton when I was in high school for whatever, and, growing up, like I always had colds and was always sick. Like it was,
Sorry,
it was life, whatever, allergies, whatever, ear infections or something. But I was always staying home from school, and then I was watching movies and listening to music. That was my, my 2 childhood things. And I remember at one point when I had moved out here, I got more into music and watching films, but it was like kind of like, okay, my friends that I had, like I wanted to play drums in a band, so my friends became people that were musicians. I remember my mom telling me after, I think, some night that I was packing up drums to go to a gig in high school, like down in Boston or wherever we were playing, that, my mom had said to me, she goes, you're a good drummer, but you'd be a better actor.
Oh,
and I remember
Mom.
totally offended me. I was like, oh my God, that was the worst thing you could have ever said. And but that moment always stuck with me. One, it made me a better drummer because I was like it was just fuel. But the other thing is that it stuck with me, and I was like, oh, that's kind of nice to know. And so fast forward to the year that I went to the film festival as just a guy who was like, looking for stuff to kind of, I don't know, spark a fire, you know what I mean, like get something started. It was really just a going to all of those panel discussions for the week of the film, or the 2 days. I think it wasn't even 3 days. I think it was just 2. But going to those and like meeting filmmakers and being able to go to them afterwards and ask questions. So I went to that and was just, as you know, you kind of go to a film festival, and if you've never been to one or whatever, and especially the New Hampshire Film Festival, it really caters towards making filmmakers, in my opinion. And so I was just like, oh God, I want to make a film. And so after that, I'd started writing a few scripts, and I'd always written and done stuff like that. And just kind of met some friends and met people that later on became huge influences on me, like, Mark Dole, Carlina Lyons, Chase Bailey, just some people that I can call friends and people that helped, push me along the way. And so, I did a 48-hour film festival thing and just got the bug from that. And it was like, I started out as like, oh, I'll just help whatever you need. And by the end of it, I think maybe I said I'd help write for the script or something like that. And by the end of it, I was acting in it, took a bunch of music because we needed a musical score for it. And having played in a bunch of bands, I had an extensive, I think I had like 8 or 9 albums that I had recorded over the years that I was like, with different genres, from everything from, indie rock to jazz to, some acoustic rock stuff and whatever. And it was able to contribute that music to that. And, so I got to see the whole process, so I after attending this thing called From Script to Screen, I was able to kind of go and see how the whole process worked in a 2-day period. And be involved in it. And then, after that, I just started writing scripts, and fast forward a year after that, and then I had submitted a script for the film festival, and I think it placed in the top 5 or something like that. I didn't win anything or whatever, but I just remember it being mentioned, and that was cool to me at that time.
Yeah, right.
And then the thing for me was really somebody saying, yeah, you just make it. It's like, well, what do I, and I learned that if you wrote something, and for me, it like made my directorial debut going, well, I'm not a director, I don't know what I'm doing. It was hysterical. A good cinematographer friend of mine, Jonathan Millman, he'd said, yeah, I'd love to do it. I like the script. It'll be fun. We'll have a good time. But, and Carlina Lyons produced it. The funniest thing was that, I kept, asking people, oh, do you want to direct this? Do you want to direct this? And I'd like interview people to direct it. And, when I got to the point of seriously considering someone, and we met, and we're going over the script, and he's talking about how, this scene, I want to film it like this, and we're talking, I think that would be great, and I completely disagreed. I was like, no, that's really impactful. Why would you film that as a scene, like,
interesting,
outside through the window to this couple having dinner? You need to be at the table. You can start it off there, I get that, but you need to be. He's like, no, I want it to be, more of a, and I was like, no. And then I realized, so my friend Jonathan, who said he'd DP it, was like, yeah, you need to direct it. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so the greatest thing in the world was like, yelling action, and then forgetting to yell cut, because my first short film ended up having, we shot it on a Red 1 when Red 1 first came out, and it was, a $50,000 camera, and then you rent a $100,000 lens package, and then you rent, and then you have a bunch of friends. So all of a sudden, your short film, with 9 pages, or whatever it is at that point, becomes 30 people, and we filmed part of it in my house and friends' places and locations. But I was just like, so I've got 30 people between cast, crew, and PAs, gaffers, grips and stuff like that, and everybody pulling in favors. It kind of became like, if you rent the gear, we're all just pitch in, we'll do it. And so it was just kind of funny going, all right, now I guess here I am in my house. There's 30.
Is this the one about the psychic?
Yeah. So that one, which started out in my brain as being a full-on comedy.
I know the trailer's very dark.
It's super dark. It's friggin', I mean, the weird thing was, and that goes to show you too, sometimes your best intentions, it became, in my mind, it was a dark comedy, and everybody else was like, man, that's just a dark film. And I was like, I thought it was funny, but, it takes a bunch of people and the evolution of things. You can see things one way, and you cast somebody in a role, and you get these people involved, and, they take it a different way, and you don't, especially as a first-time director, you're like, I kind of like that. As opposed to saying, nope, do this. It's more a black comedy. And, I learned a ton, but, calling action and forgetting to yell cut. And everybody's kind of looking at me. I was like, oh, you cut. Oh, yeah. And I think I probably did it like this, like, cut. Because I was like, am I supposed to be here? Like, everybody showed up to do this. But, it's like the Nike slogan, just to do it.
Yeah.
And you just do it. And
so it's baptism by fire.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I mean, why not?
Yeah.
That's the way to learn. That's how I learned how to swim.
Those 48-hour film festivals, if you want baptism by fire, that's the way to go. And that, you said that was one of your first endeavors?
My first endeavor was a 48-hour film thing that we did called Tweet. And then my second, so I did that, and then I did we did a follow-up to it because we had once, I don't remember how it all went now, but then so we did a follow-up to it called The Bureau that was kind of like a spoof on The Office. And then I think after I had done that, I did, Chase Bailey had done his first kind of short film that had, it was a big budget short in the sense that it was a 4 or 5 day shoot. There were named actors, named talent in it. John Cusack's sister was in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ann Cusack, who was in, like League of Their Own, and she's been in a bunch of, whether it's films or TV shows, but then, who else was in that? I just blanked on his name, and he was in Apollo 13. He's done it. He's one of those guys that you'd reckon. He was on Lost. Brett Cullen, thank you, was in it. Chase directed it. There's a few other people in it, but it was one of those things. So then all of a sudden I signed up to be a PA on that. So my first day on that film, I was lugging tables and chairs up 2 flights of stairs for, craft services so everybody could have lunch. And then by the end of the first day, I'd kind of become friends with the woman who was casting extras. I'm like, well, I'll be an extra in the film. That'd be a lot easier, a lot more fun than lugging stuff around town. And
so this was after you started directing your other stuff?
This was all kind of before I directed my, in the 9 months leading to directing my first film. It was all like kind of leading up to that, or kind of all happened around the same time. I think we filmed that in the summer, and in the fall is when I shot my first film. But you just kind of, baptism by fire, and you do it.
So for anybody who might hear this that doesn't understand what a 48-hour film festival is, can you give us a quick overview of?
Yeah, sign up to do it, but it's literally you get assigned a genre. You get assigned a couple of things. I think there's a line to dialogue and a prop that has to be in it, and other than that, that's what you do. You
get it like Friday afternoon or Friday evening.
You get it like Friday evening at 7:00. And then you have, 48 hours later, and then, Sunday evening at 7:00, you have to turn in. And back then, you had to physically turn in at a location a DVD with the film burned on it.
Yeah.
So whereas now you can just upload it.
Yeah.
And then, I remember we shot. What was it? Did we shoot Tweet? Yeah, we Tweet. We shot the first time. We shot on a DSLR. We shot on it was a Nikon D90 or something like that, which at the very beginning of the DSLR you can shoot video on this. The funny thing about that is the camera kept overheating, which was all of a sudden we're like, cut, because the camera just shut off.
Kidding.
So you'd lose takes, but we were learning in the process, and it was cool. And you get that stuff done, and then as things go on, and you get exposed to other.
I think the 48 is really fascinating because you can have an idea in your head, but you don't know what you could be science fiction, you could be comedy, you could be love drama, you could be.
Oh yeah.
So your idea can go right out the window real quick, and you don't even know who to bring in to act or do anything for it.
No, so you try to pre-plan with everything, and there's people that are really good at doing these that kind of just do them all the time, and they have a core group of actors, a DP, an editor, a guy that does the score, a guy that does the writing, and they just
plug them in as they go along,
and it's great. Whereas we're just like pulling on friends, like, okay, hey, so which is why we did one a couple years later, and I remember like signing up to be a writer again or a director or something like that, and everybody that signed up didn't show up. Like the actors and whatever didn't. We got like just suspense drama or something like that. So all of a sudden, I went from being a guy who's going to write it with a couple other people to a couple of us. We basically improv'd it, and we kind of all directed it, the scenes that we weren't so much in. If I was in a scene and I ended up playing the lead, which I thought was funny. Because I don't generally consider myself an actor, but it's kind of fun, if you get to...
It's a lot of fun.
It's a ton of fun. You're really good at it.
Thanks.
I used to think I was okay at it, and the more I go along with all this, I'm like, I'm better off behind the camera. Because I can't take anything I say seriously when I'm acting, so especially if it's a serious role. And then you just do it, and in the end, it's really cool. You're like, hey... Especially if you've never done anything and you want to, it's a great way to be involved in something from start to finish and add something to your reel. You know what I mean? Like if you want to be an actor and you're like, oh, I just want to be an actor and I've done school plays. Well, there's a huge difference, as you know, between doing theater and doing film acting. And so it's a great way to make that transition and be like, hey, well, tons of stuff for film down in Boston and I want to talk to Boston casting, but I don't really have a reel, but do a 48-hour film festival, and there you go. And if you're really good about it, film. You've got the film that you guys do for 48 Hour. Have somebody do like behind the scenes, a little BTS footage, and you can use that too. So brilliant. You've got some outtakes and just, nowadays with the fact that you can film you can. I don't recommend it, although I've shot documentaries where I had little scenes shot on a cell phone because I had that, and it's 4K, and you laugh about that, but it's a great way to shoot. Yeah.
That was one of the things that's how I got even interested in really film. I've been stage acting for a long time, and I kind of wanted to transition because there was something about film, and I didn't know anything about it. And I forget where I saw like an audition notice for Scott Millette. They were going to do a 48-hour film, and for some reason I was down in Lowell already, and he was holding an audition, I think, in Somerville, or maybe I was down in that area. But anyway, I had no idea. Literally, I had no idea what this entailed. So I go down there, and I audition for it. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking 48-hour film festival. It's probably just a lot of garage kids, putting out film. I had no idea that this was a big thing. People get really involved in this.
Oh, the production levels are they've only gotten better over the years that I've seen that I refuse to do. Oh, I don't refuse, but I just don't do them anymore because, well, once you've done it, you're like, yeah, I was awake for, I think I slept for, 2 hours, and we were editing and going through, just, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But it's, at the end of it, you're like, man, especially like if you're a director, I would imagine now going back to that and being like, let's do this because it gives you something that, you can. It's a short film. You can submit to a film festival if you want, or, and I would even think about it this way too, like shoot the whole thing if you've got a script idea or whatever. And I might be going, pissing off a lot of people in the 48-hour film project, but shoot the whole thing because you've got all the resources, but also make a cut of it that might be a little bit longer that doesn't include the line that you have to say and the prop you have to say. And, you can kind of finagle your genre a little bit to be able to put something together that's like, hey, if you've got this idea, you can make it work.
Yeah.
And pull out of that shoot, you might be able to shoot enough footage that you can make a completely separate film, that, you kind of pulled everything together. You did your thing for 48, and you can turn it around and do it for a short film, submit it to film.
And in 48 hours, you've got a film.
That's the thing that's amazing.
As opposed to a 3-year project or a 5-year project.
Yeah, having done both. I'm telling you, man.
For a newbie, it was a great learning experience because I had no idea what went on behind the scenes. None whatsoever. I had never been on a film set, and it was just, I was enthralled. It's chaos. And the clock is ticking, and you can feel the pressure as time's going on, and people are like, we got to get this scene done because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
We got to edit this, we got to put it on the DVD, we got to get it down there. But it was really cool to see how all the parts fit together.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen it on stage, but not in film, and this was really pretty cool to me to see how this stuff can and cannot get done.
Oh yeah, I've known people who didn't finish their film.
We didn't get ours in. We were like, what Scott was like, it was like a minute late or something.
Yeah, and they're sticklers. They're like, sorry,
They were.
Oops, you didn't do it. You get to still screen your film. I think they're pretty cool about letting you screen, but you're no longer in contention for anything. And it's which it's kind of funny, but it's a great way to make that jump if you're interested in film or at various aspects of it, whether with acting, directing, editing, and you get to see it all firsthand. And the cool thing is I can say, as a guy, you just spoke to this kind of at the beginning, but as a guy who didn't go to film school, watched a bunch of films. Going back to those days when I was a sick kid, man, all I did was watch films. I'm the most, when I was younger, my parents hated watching, and friends hated watching films with me because I'd be like, oh, this is the part where this is going to happen. They're like, how do you know it's going to happen? Because it's Act 3. You know what I mean? Like you kind of go, well, here, you had all this stuff happen in Act 2 that built up to this whole thing, and now this is Act 3, and this is where we're going to get our resolution, and this is how, and unfortunately, that's just how storytelling is in film, and it's not a bad thing, but it's just like I learned that through osmosis, I guess, and you realize as you get older or whatever that film, whether it's shot on a digital SLR, whether it's shot on your cell phone, whether it's shot on the latest and greatest Hollywood Red, Alexa, whatever, whether it's shot on film, you're telling a story, and so if you're telling a good story, you can do it on the for next to nothing shoestring budget. There's people that make great film on shoestring budgets. It's just telling a great story and getting it out there for people to see. And 10 years ago we didn't have the YouTube thing that we have now. You didn't have social media. You didn't have there wasn't Facebook. You couldn't. There's a lot of things that are available now to filmmakers as far as marketing, promotion, advertising, getting people together in an easier capacity. But recording, editing, producing, putting out good content is a lot easier now.
Yeah, and that's almost a curse too, though, right? Because so many more people can do it now, and you can get lost in that crowd. Right?
But the cream always rises to the top. That's my opinion.
Well said.
But it has to be that, right? Because if you go back 50 years, I'm sure there's tons of filmmakers, whether it's Francis Ford Coppola or Scorsese or, Spielberg or, these guys are all great and we all know them. And now we've got, the J.J. Abrams and there's tons of, I could go down the list. But you've got this core, these people that it's always going to, you're always going to see the best work. You're always going to be able, that stuff is always going to make its way up. So Quentin Tarantino, which I don't know if he ever said, I never went to film school, I just went to films, but I love that quote because now we're living in a day and age, and he kind of helped kick that off. But you can learn to make a film by watching film, content on YouTube on how to create content, and then just kind of extrapolate that and put together a cast and crew, and you can do a small, Scott and I have always talked about we need to do a feature horror film because between the
he's got the trailer. He's working on it.
Exactly. Or to just do it because it's fun and you can make what's going to look really good and be great, just tell a great story. And the joke for he and I was always to do a horror film, because that's what has the ability to make the most money, which is a sad kind of flip side to independent film. But as a guy who's made a bunch of, several feature documentaries, it's not, it's cool to do it and get it out there and change things and help and get a few dollars in your pocket and all that. But it'd be great to be able to say, yeah, I want to do this thing that's going to explode and become the next whatever.
Yeah. But you never
just
know.
have the call fire on. You don't know. There's tons of films that bomb at the box office that make, that people, just kind of shrug their shoulders and the test audience said that was going to be great, and we failed to make our ROI on that film.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Now we're not going
to. I don't know. I'm not sure where to go. I have a lot of questions, but my questions are. Some is about the mechanics of filmmaking. Some is about you as a filmmaker. Well, let's just get the mechanics out of the way. So,
okay. That's an easier question.
As someone who watches films, and I don't make them, I notice there's a difference in the quality of. This gets back to what you were saying. Anybody can make one, but You know, so I saw your documentary. It was great. Some of the shots were great. Would you use a drone in some of those shots for the
Some of them, yeah, drone footage. That was funny if you want to get technical on that, because some of the stuff was done. There's a few cutaway scenes that are shot on my cell phone. There's a few, obviously, drone footage. Fortunately, a good friend who's a very good drone pilot, and was like, hey, let's go through some footage I shot the other day, and you can use this, which is awesome.
It looked really cool.
Some of it is me shooting handheld with a Sony A7S, and then some of it's shot on a Canon C100, and for a lot of the interviews, which is great, because when we set out to do that, we had an outline, an idea of what I wanted to do for a film, but didn't know the storyline. You know what I mean? I was like, this is important, this is going on now, this is huge, this is newsworthy. And so I became this guy that just started shooting everything pertaining. So whether it was political, whether it was, these, and it was just like, it's not how I would ever recommend to anybody to shoot a film. You know what I mean? When you're like, I don't know where this is going to go, but at the time we didn't know where it was going. And so it was like just trying to capture things as they happened and go, where is that going to fit into this film?
Seriously?
Yeah. And so there's, 2.5 years of filming for that. And then there's footage in that was shot by a gentleman who filmed it all on his cell phone.
No kidding.
The film was called The Heroin Effect.
Yep.
Still is. But it literally, he filmed himself on his cell phone, and I have about 3 hours of footage of that. And I mean, it's probably is a grand total of, in a 90-minute film, I think his footage is probably 15 minutes total that made it into the film of that 3 hours. But it's, granted, again, shot on a cell phone, but you can't take your eyes off of it.
Right.
I mean, I could probably take all of the cell phone footage that I have of just him in that, turn it into a film, and it would haunt people.
Yeah, I believe it.
It's, but, it's that found footage aspect of it that makes documentaries really cool. And then, if it's the right footage telling the right story, it doesn't matter what it's shot on. I will say it always matters how good the audio is.
Maybe that's where
audio is the key.
Question is going to be, because I've seen some films made by not professionals. You can tell it's off somehow. Maybe it is the sound. It's kind of canned. I mean, tinny or something. Because I watch your film, and it's a film. It works like a film. It looks like a film. But then you watch some others, and you're like, dude, that's not professional. I mean, it's not that's not cut right, or there's something about it that's off. It's not. I don't know what it is. I think years ago, Christian filmmakers had that problem where they did it, but there was something cheap about it. I don't know how. I hope that's not that might not be the great way to say it, but.
No, I think I know what you're saying. I mean, I think for a while, independent film, and that line is blurring now a lot, but you can give somebody who doesn't know what they're doing the greatest equipment in the world, and it's not going to come out good. And you can give somebody that knows what they're doing the worst equipment in the world, and it's going to be amazing. And I think, given those things, and it's the cream rises to the top thing, and the same thing goes through with, you hear musicians talk about it. You can have, Eric Clapton play the same beat-up piece of crap guitar that you got some other kid playing, and one of them will make that crap guitar sing beautiful. You know what I mean? And it is just, that's where the craft, the technique, the ability to tell stories and do something in a way that's different and piece it all together and tell a story with a story arc and timing and playing to the beat. I mean, there's so many there's so many little things that go into making a film, and it's a collaborative medium, and you need to have somebody to hold you back and rein you in, so you don't have that beautiful edit of that scene, which is however long, and you have to have an editor and a producer that are going to look at you and go, yeah, you can cut that down. Like, right now it's 5 minutes, it needs to be 1. And you're like, as the artist in you is like, you can't, this is perfect. And then you get to go through and you cut it all down, and you're like, oh no, it still works, and it still has the same emotional appeal, and we get through it, and it's timing-wise, and it's great. I mean, and it works.
That has to be an art. To be able to look
That-
at something and compress it down and still get out of it what you want.
Yeah, and it's important, and it's that thing that's a huge part of the art form, and I think, you know, it's a learning process. I mean, I learned to editing this last documentary because I realized I couldn't afford to have anybody else edit it, and so I was like, all right, I need to
You
learn.
did
how
all
to-
the editing on that?
Yeah. But it was again trial by fire.
Yeah.
So I learned to
Wow.
edit. I had people help me. You know, I mean, Mike Bernard who owns Fuel Creative in downtown Portsmouth. He does a lot of like live stream and film editing and commercial and you know, industrials and stuff like that. He let me use his studio, and he would, you know, I could ask him questions. He'd just do this. This is
Nice
how you do it.
friend.
And he would help kind of early on get a framework going. And then he was, you know, he basically was like, listen, you're just telling me, you know, my whole thing before is I was always like, I was always that guy who was over the editor's shoulder, you know, like, oh, can you do that? Can you do, you know, which I'm sure is the most annoying thing is, you know, to an editor,
Yeah.
if you're the director, like, oh, can do this, and why don't you do this? But I think that once you kind of gone through that process, and then all of a sudden it's like somebody says, okay, here's the steering wheel, go,
Yeah.
you drive,
Yeah.
and then you have to put yourself in that. So for me, you know, having my first real editing trial by fire moment was doing this feature documentary that we premiered at the music hall in front of 900 people. You know, when you sell tickets to 900 people, and you're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
You're kind of. I sat there and I don't remember much of the actual film. I just remember sweating, knowing when certain things were going to come up, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to lose the audience and they're going to hate me. You know, or because of how I edited things, or you know, how I shot things, or the story points that I'm telling and stuff like that. So you just kind of make yourself super vulnerable. You put yourself out there, and you're like, okay, great, I got to go do it. And it's a scary process in that sense. You know, I mean, think about all those things that you're like, oh, I want to do this, this, and this, and then doing them and putting it out there. And I always hold myself accountable because, like, when I wrote the summary to the Heroin Effect, you know, and showed it to somebody, I'm like, okay, well, I showed it to somebody, so now I have to do this. You know, as soon as they're like, yeah, it's good, I think that's a good film, you should probably do that. And I'm like, oh, all right, put it out there. And then you have accountability.
I love this. I really do love this. I mean, when I say it fascinates me, this fascinates me. Theater doesn't fascinate me. I can do it. Film, literally. So to go from an idea all the way through that end product, which is released,
Mm-hmm.
and all the things that go in between it, like the editing, where you have to sacrifice something. You're sacrificing to get. You have
David Mamet called it killing your babies.
Did he?
Yeah, you gotta. It doesn't serve the story. You gotta cut it. Sometimes you're cutting. There's scenes in that film that never made it into the film. That it was like, I'd sit there and be like, I can't cut it. I don't want to cut that. That's so great. And it would be like, it's too long and it doesn't drive the story.
Oh man.
And so when you have a producer, when everybody always jokes about producers and like, what the hell do they do? They just stand around and blah, blah.
Yeah.
Having a good producer, and Carlina was wonderful in that film. She'd be like, nope, that got to kill your babies.
I don't know what a producer does. What does a producer do? What's their role? I mean, I always think of them as maybe they're a gopher, or you know, they try to get funding or something. But I have no
There's
clue.
that aspect for like an executive producer. A real producer is somebody that helps you tell your story, helps you with the funds, helps you get the people that you need. You know what I mean? So whether it's getting the right editors involved early on, they help you throughout the entire process of, you know, you're telling your story, and then they help you say, you have to cut this. You have to stop filming. It's a documentary. At some point, you kind of sit there and you're like, well, I've been doing this for 2 years. Maybe I should stop. And then your producer's like, yeah, you've got enough. Why don't you start editing and make that film? You know what I mean? Or whatever it is. And it's just kind of reining you in. And as an artist, I think you don't know how to stop or where to stop, and you want to. So I think there's certain people that make films that I've tried to watch that I can't, because I think that they don't have producers that rein them in enough. And you're like, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, again, it fascinates
but I think
me
there's things that, you know, so if you've got a good producer and they can help you tell your story, and like I said before, it is a collaborative medium, and you need to have those right people. I mean, I'm not a person who's really not like super anal about things and have to do, you know, I'm not an OCD person. But if you put me in a situation where it involves a film, I will get lost editing one scene over and over and over and over, and whether it's shooting it in multiple angles and different takes and just over and over, because and then really when it comes to editing and you think about pacing and you think about the musical score, for me the music in the film is so much more important. I joke about the horror film thing. Watch a horror film without any sound. They're funny. There's nothing scary about it. But you add the music. You know what I mean? You add the musical score. It's tension and release, and it tells you when to jump and when not to jump and catch you off guard. And you're doing the same thing, driving the story home with a documentary. So you need to have the right music in the right spots in order to propel a story. And it becomes harder. And I always joke, I've done 2 documentaries, and after each one I've been like, I'm never doing a documentary film again.
Why is that?
Because they take too long. It's a pain in the butt. But at some point there's a story that grabs you, and you're like, somebody's got to tell that story, and then all of a sudden that somebody becomes you.
Michael, I have so much. You just keep opening these cans of worms. I don't know where to go here.
Oh, well, you can go all over. I'll direct myself.
You have won a lot of awards and been nominated, right? In your short career. You've got the Heroin Effect, award-winning documentary. It says here you won Filmmaker of the Year in 2017 at the New Hampshire Film Festival. You got this Dark Scribbles, which was over there at the Festival de Cannes. The award-winning feature documentary In Danger of Being Discovered, which was I saw the trailer for that. It looked cool.
It's a fun film.
I know nothing about musicians either, but it was just kind of cool to know what's going on out there in Portsmouth, and that there's this underworld of musicians that are out there pounding away.
It was a great story about independent music and an independent music scene and a music scene and the love of what was going on. That film, like the basis of that film, was a storyline that took place in the mid-'90s. That like the hustle, like what was going on here was the same thing that was going on in like Seattle. Like we could have been the next Seattle. It was on the tip of everybody's tongue. Like, the problem is that Seattle had kind of the Seattle sound, and we had a music scene that was a whole bunch of different sounds, different bands, whether it was, hardcore punk, whether it was kind of groove jam band stuff, whether it was kind of jazz, whether it was kind of jazz-tinged, rock, whether it was all these things where there was hip-hop bands and funk bands and soul bands, but they all would play the same venues, and they would all, play together and support each other, and, so we just didn't have that thing. But there's a lot of bands out of that scene that almost made it, but there's a lot of guys that were in bands at that scene at that time that did. So whether it was, guys like Al Barr, who was, a staple at the Elvis Room in his band The Bruisers, which was his high school band, that is still a great band. They're doing a reuniting their show in Boston at the Middle East, I think, coming up this summer. But, huge influential, like, underground punk band at the time. And then he left, joined the Dropkick Murphys, and then everybody knows who the Dropkick Murphys are now. And, 20-some years later, he's still in the Dropkicks. They're touring the world. I think they're actually in Scotland right now. And, but to put him in the film and be like, yeah, I remember when he was just in the punk band next to my band's rehearsal space, and I got to know those guys then. And, so that band, guys who were in, Fly Spinach Fly, which was kind of like an early hip-hop rock band that won like the second or they came in second at the MTV Spring Break Best College Band thing. So they were almost there, right? But they were fusing, rock music with, the Beastie Boys with hip-hop and stuff, and funk. They had a horn section. So, that's kind of weird. But one of the guys in that band is in Mark Paquin, goes by Mark Damon, but now he's in The Pretty Reckless. So they're, internationally known and tour the world and sell a lot of albums, and I think they're doing, I don't know, 4th or 5th. Jamie Perkins, who's the drummer in that band, again, another local guy from the local music scene at that time. It's weird, like I start talking about this, and I'm like, yeah, there's tons of people that were, the band Thanks to Gravity, who got signed to Capitol Records, and they, Groove Child, who didn't sign with anybody and should have. They sold 30,000 copies of their debut album out of a van kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like locally, they were charting higher than everybody else was as a local band of high school kids, high school / just out of high school. So at the time, that music scene was really cool, and it was great to go look back at it and capture it and see that the great thing about it is those guys are all still playing, you know, and it was cool to see that. Now, granted, I think you can watch it on Vimeo. You know what I mean? Like, it never had a huge release. We did a release at the Music Hall in Portsmouth, big sellout thing, had 2 of the bands play. It was really cool. The cool thing about it is both of those bands ended up reuniting afterwards and putting out more music. And, you know, which is, here I'll plug Thanks to Gravity. I think they just released an album like a month ago. And they were in it, and they were signed to Capitol, and they're great. I mean, just a super talented bunch of guys who love playing music and still do. So those guys, and it's cool to see that storyline of like love of music doesn't change. You know, if you don't make it, you're still making music. Yeah. You know, not everybody. You know, sometimes the greatest musicians in the world aren't the ones that make it, and sometimes the worst ones do.
Yeah, there's a lot of irony there.
There's truly.
Oh man!
Can you tell I have ADD?
No, it's great because it brings up stuff which I didn't even think about asking you about. So, Venn Creative. I'm going to spin off here. Venn Creative Media. I see you do a lot of Car Guru.
Yeah, thanks to Scott. He turned me on to them, and now I'm the only guy that shoots and edits for their.
Cool. I like them. They're well done.
Well, thank you. They're fun to do.
Yeah, they look like they are, even though it's just a commercial for a car. But
it's a test drive and review, and the problem is I like cars. You know what I mean? So the greatest thing to doing those is like I love cars, and I always have since I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like I remember when other kids, everybody wanted to be a baseball player or a fireman and a policeman. Like literally, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a race car driver. And I think it only stemmed from the fact that my dad traveled a ton for business when I lived in Miami. He would always come back from South America, where his kind of territory was, and he'd bring me like Formula One cars, like little die-cast 1/8 scale Formula One cars, like every time. Like that was like a cool thing. So, and my dad, we had, he had cool cars when he was younger or whatever, and so I wanted to be a race car driver, just whatever. And then I just have always liked cars, so. Doing Car Guru stuff, it's a blast, and expanding on that right now and doing a few other things. But it all seems to be car related, film and car related, which is great because it allows me to have a steady paycheck doing stuff that I like. Whether it's doing the Car Guru stuff, whether it's filming some content for dealerships, working on something that I don't want to talk too much about, but could be really, really, really cool, involving some really great cars and the stories behind those cars and that are coming up. So doing that, and it's great too because I think that there's something that I did learn kind of post being the social media director of a company after doing my last documentary and filming for that and doing it and realizing that sometimes taking that creative aspect of filmmaking and just being able to tell little stories, whether it's interviews with people who are, in my case, I've done a bunch of stuff with people based from the Heroin Effect, and then telling stories of people in recovery and finding recovery, or, whether you get to have those moments, whether it's in interviewing for a documentary or interviewing for a commercial or interviewing for online content for somebody, and it becomes telling stories.
Yeah.
And, even in the Car Guru stuff, you're telling a story about the person's version of that car, so it is a commercial thing or whatever, but if you're doing it and you're doing it well, I think you're going to have fun, and you get to get some great takes and pull people's personalities out a little bit more and have fun doing it.
I used to think that was just a trite saying, that you're telling a story, being a filmmaker. Well, because I don't know, I'm ignorant is really what it is.
Maybe it is.
But no, I don't think it is. I think once you get a feel for what's happening, you understand there is a story in there. It's kind of like a sculptor. Mm-hmm. He sees what's in the block or in the clay before it's ever made. He's got that. And that story's going to come out. Mm-hmm. They have to get it out, really, basically.
Yeah. But we're doing the same thing here that you end up doing in if you're doing a documentary and you're talking to somebody and you're the director of the documentary, you're the guy behind the camera, so to speak, whether you're running the camera. You're just the guy asking the questions to the person who's going to be in this documentary film, and you're doing it. You're trying to tell their story. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that process, you're asking questions, you're pulling things out. You're going to go through and review all that footage that you shot and find the best things. You know, as it is, you and I are talking, we're doing this podcast. We're asking you, we're having a conversation that's bringing up stuff that you didn't even think to ask.
Right.
So as a filmmaker, I always laughed, you know, when people who I've known or have thought that, oh, so you're just basically going to show up with a bunch of questions and you're going to ask me. I'm like, no, we're just going to sit down and have a conversation. Because if you're doing a documentary and you're dealing with people who aren't actors, that aren't used to being on camera, and all of a sudden you're like, all right, we're going to set you up in front of a camera, sometimes two, maybe there's lighting, maybe there isn't, but you're going to be mic'd and you're going to be wearing a lav or going to have a couple mics. I think it's your job as the director of that documentary is to make everybody, one, make them comfortable, make them forget that there's a camera in the room. And, you know, I mean, doing a film on heroin, you're getting people to tell stories that are not things they really want to talk about.
Yeah.
Doing stuff, you know, when we did In Danger of Being Discovered, and we're talking about kind of this magical period in that music scene in that time. I mean, you're getting people to tell these stories that are like, oh, man, you know, I remember we did this gig, and blah, blah. You're helping them tell those stories, and the greatest thing that I learned in the instances in doing those docs was to shut up and listen and just, you know, listen, allow those stories to come out.
Yeah.
You know, and make people feel comfortable so that all of a sudden, you know, at the end of it all, they look around and they're like, oh my God, I forgot there was a camera.
Yeah.
Then you've done your job.
I can see where you have to almost, the process has to be very organic and malleable, because there's jewels in there you don't even know exist yet, right? And at some point you're like, oh, that was rich.
The happy accidents. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. That's a great phrase too.
It's what I think I stole it from the Happy Little Trees guy, the
Okay.
painter there. You know who I'm talking about?
Oh,
Bob Ross.
yeah.
I think at some point he had said that, and that stuck, and I've heard other people use it, and I'm like, but it's a happy accident. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I thought that, you know, you're filming something, and you're like, we'll do one more take. You guys do what you want to do. You know, how would you see that? You know, you're like, oh, crap, that's great. Or even in interviewing for a documentary, and you talk to somebody, and you think something's over, and you just don't say anything, and whoever's in front of that camera, and you know that they're thinking about something, and you just like let it go. And there could be a minute of silence of them just sitting there, and then all of a sudden, you know, thank God you didn't turn off the camera, because something, you know, something amazing comes out, and you're like,
Those moments are priceless.
Yep.
You cannot script those. That's the great thing about them.
Absolutely.
They're true, they're raw, they're real, they're honest.
Mm-hmm.
This is not even in that vein pretty much, but I did a commercial for Alteri, and my sister was playing my wife. Kind of an odd thing to say.
Isn't that a show, Sister Wives? I've never seen it.
Odd thing to say. But,
Yes.
and they did that to her. They had a line that they needed delivered, and they had her do it. And then they just said to her, just improvise. Say it any way you want. And she kind of yelled it or kind of screamed harshly. Mm-hmm. She was playing this like Gladys Kravitz, nosy neighbor kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they loved it. The first time she did it, she just kind of screamed, and it was exactly what they had wanted. But they couldn't verbalize it earlier,
Or they didn't know that they wanted it.
Right, good, excellent point.
I mean, sometimes you do get things about, like I said, you know, way back in my first film and directing it, and not thinking I had a dark comedy and that was funnier on my hands, and realized that it was a lot darker with the comedy, you know, and it was how the people played it. And thank God they did. You know, I mean, I learned, you know, in that first, you know, casting for that, you know, the woman who played the lead in it, I was so glad that I cast her. I was so glad that she played it how she did, because in my mind it wouldn't have worked had it played the way that I thought originally it was going to. And then, I mean, I ended up having another guy who I ended up basically firing. My first film cast this guy, did a table read, and then had to just be like, I think we need to recast the male lead in this because it's not what I thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we got a guy who came in and slayed it. And he was exactly what, and it was great too when I remember talking to him on the phone and, days before we went into production, cast him, gave him the, and I had sent him the script, and he was like, he goes, I love it. He goes, it's really funny. Like, this guy says stuff that I could hear myself saying at some point in my life, like I was that guy. And I was like, thank God, and then, then I met him, and then he did it, and I was like, dude, you are, spot on. So, you get those happy accident moments, but where you kind of go, oh, all is lost. But, and the other thing too is I always think it's great, like, if you have the time and you're not super rushed, but if you can say, all right, you guys just give me what you do a take for you, for the actors, or so to speak, like, all right, we got what I think is going to be the one, but you could have actors come in and blow the doors off of a scene because they play it differently, and,
Yeah. So, you've done some documentaries. You do some stuff for the Car Guru guys. What else you got baking?
I have my Nemesis film that is a short film that I wrote in 2012 that I might be shooting this summer.
Feature length?
No, it's a short. It's a short. Probably it'll be a 5-minute film. But I say it's my Nemesis because I wrote it and I never filmed it because it's not easy. It's because it's a silent film. When you challenge yourself with something?
That's interesting.
Like, the dumbest thing that I could have ever done was like, dude, I'm like, I need to challenge myself with this. And it comes down to, okay, it's storytelling without words, and then you've got to get the right actors and the right things and everything like that. And it just never came together when I wanted to do it before. And now, just with the way things are as far as cameras and being able to shoot certain things certain ways and get away with a lot of stuff, and it's just finding the right actors to work with. And I've got a couple of people in mind and would love to be able to get them to do it. I'm just still kind of, I looked at the script and I was like, okay, the idea that I had then is still there. Need to update it and change it a little bit so that it's not what it was, but it's better, and it'll actually probably shorten it. But it's again, doing that. But yeah, it's a silent film. It's kind of in the vein of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, but with kind of a moral and not a moral story. That's the wrong word. It's got a heart to it that was very much my own personal journey. I think in a weird way of being able to let go of the world of working in corporate America or working in that job that you hate, and day after day, and your life is the same every single day, and being able to find a way to let go of that and move on doing something that you love. So that was kind of the impetus for that story, and doing it in a fashion that hopefully that whole story arc gets told, and there's multiple layers to it, because with this story, I'm being super vague. I know it's
okay.
It sounds weird.
I know. I get it.
But not judging a book by its cover, and you know what I mean. Having so there's, and I think there's just elements of my own life, and I think that's where, anybody who's a writer, I think they pull from their life stories or their life experiences, or people that they know's life experiences and stories. Like you can be super close with somebody, and they tell you a story, and you're like, God, that.
Right. All
right. Well, that really happened, and you can't write that shit and stuff. And so, you take that and you adapt it into a screenplay.
Yeah.
And it's.
Is that going to be a summer project, or is that?
Yeah, I hope to film it this summer. I might reach out to you for something.
In Portsmouth? Oh, thanks.
Just so you know.
In Portsmouth?
Probably shoot it in Portsmouth because I live there and it's easy.
Yeah.
And it's a good filming location. Like years ago.
It is.
Well, we shot 4 or 5 years ago. Shot a series of music videos for this girl who's super talented, and we, you kind of. It was great to know that in, a 10-mile radius of Portsmouth, you can get so many different locations where it looks like you're in the country. You could look like you're in the Midwest. You can have a skyline that's like you're in Chicago or Manhattan or whatever. I mean, okay, maybe not Chicago or Manhattan, but you can have a skyline that gives you the idea that you're in a larger city. You can, whether it's without having to go into Boston, and you know what I'm saying. So you can do certain things. You can cheat certain things in ways that, offers you everything. I love that about Portsmouth. Like, there's, you can go to certain streets. You're like, okay, I'm in Cambridge. Okay, you can go over here and be like, oh, I'm in rural wherever. It's just kind of, it's a great multiple location kind of place. So
yeah. Are you happy with the short genre? With the, I mean, in the back of your mind, is there like, I gotta at some point get a full length kind of a movie out there?
Oh, yeah. Well,
or are you? No, I mean, because you might just be like, you know what? I love doing 5 minute, 10 minute.
Oh no, back in the day, people always said, well, you do the short because that becomes your calling card.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so you do short film because that's what, that becomes like, here, I can do this. This is what I do. My thing is I've already done, I've done documentaries. I've done, which I never once set out to be like the next Ken Burns. You know what I mean? Like, that is an amazing, there's certain Michael Moore. There's people that are these amazingly successful documentary filmmakers that are, it's awe-inspiring, and I would love to be able to do that, but I don't have some big financial backer saying, here, do this. I wish I did. So the next best thing is to keep doing with what you kind of do and what you love, and finding, Scott and I have always talked about doing the horror film, because it would be fun. You know what I mean? That's the kind of thing where I always joke about the fact, like, you shoot a horror film and they're really scary, but as a filmmaker, that at the end of the scene that's so scary and the director yells cut, everybody is laughing. It's just like, or they start laughing, or at least I hope it's that way. We'll see. But in my mind, in The Conjuring, which is a freaking scary movie that I can't even watch but at some point, there's a scene where everybody's bust out laughing, and they're just. But I think there's a way to do films like that really well, and I'd love to do everything from whether it's a romantic comedy or just, it'd be great and it'd be fun. I don't think I'd turn away from doing any of that stuff.
So if someone had handed you $1 million or a couple $1 million, you have a project that's sitting there on the shelf ready, you'd be like,
if somebody
we're
handed
hitting
me a
the
couple
street
$1
with
million,
this.
I could put together a project in time to do it. Absolutely. Whether it's something where I think there's if somebody wanted to give me the money to do something like that, there's all of those different things I could definitely see. One at some point, absolutely would love to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's having the right script, but the right people, but knowing.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. So if someone handed you money,
mm-hmm.
would you be able to just say, "Oh, I have this thing has been burning in my soul for 5 years," or would it be, okay, now I got to go find a project?
It might be both. It like literally might be both. I mean, there's definitely stuff that I'd probably go, I could pull out that thing that I wrote a few years ago, which was an outline for, it's like a 30-page outline kind of idea for a film, which is kind of, breakdown of each of the acts. And I'm like, I could probably pull that together. Or I might go, you know what? Let me go see, I know a few good writers, or let me just go see what else is out there. Or, book adaptations and stuff like that. I mean, there's other, I mean, if you think about it right now, what makes the most money at the box office? Comic book movies. Which, and if you think about what a comic book is, it is essentially a film. It's a storyboard with a story from start to finish. Yeah. So you go, okay, we have now cut out the writing. Well, we got the story. We're good. We got the writing. We got the dialogue. We've got it storyboarded for us right there in the panels in the comic. What do you got to do? You look at that and you go, okay, great. We got to cast this person. You know what I mean? Like, so there are certain. I mean, a very good friend of mine who I grew up with. His dad and my dad went to college together. They're still best of friends. But my friend David Peterson is probably about to be a household name in a lot of ways, or at least I hope. I want that for people who are artists that have tried and been successful for so long. But he does a comic book called Mouse Guard. Started it 10, 12 years ago, has grown it. It's an amazing comic. He's been very successful. He's won the Eisner Award at Comic-Con. He's, I think, more than once. It's an amazing comic. A couple of years ago, it got picked up by a guy who was like, "Hey, we want to do this as a feature film." And the people that picked it up were the guys that were involved with the new Planet of the Apes movies, and the guy who's the screenwriter who was like who got tasked with writing the screenplay from his comic, wrote what was it, Rogue One? You may have heard of it. It was a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, a small one.
So and so those people are involved in it. Now it's starting to get cast, and there's bigger names that are attached to it. I just want to see that become the next. It has so much potential, and they're great stories. And I've known David since we were kids. He's a couple years younger than me, and he's an amazingly talented artist. And as little pieces, 2 years ago we were hanging out in Michigan at my parents' place, and he was telling me about it got picked up, and that's just where it's at, whatever. But hey, I'm not expecting anything and whatever. But it's really cool to know 2 years since then, we're now at a point where we're talking about, okay, there's big name people that are attached to it as the voices for these characters and for his characters. And he said something at the time, but I've heard him say it in like Facebook posts and stuff like that. He's just like, I just had an idea. The difference is I wrote it down. Mm. And it's that, and I think that drives me. And like, think about how many people are like, oh, I've got this great idea for a movie. Yeah. Whether it's I've got a great idea for a movie, I got a great idea for a book, I got a great idea for a song, and you just go, it's taking an idea. I have more respect for somebody that like had an idea, made the movie, and it sucked.
Yes.
Because you did it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, my hat's off to them.
It's
too,
like if you've done it, and I mean, and then to get it done and put it out there. And the same thing goes with a song, movie, book, whatever. I mean, my latest thing is I've joked for a couple of years now, and now I'm getting more serious about it. Is I have a book idea that I want to write, and have started. And it's that thing where I'm like, okay, well, I said it. I talked to people. I talked to enough people. I'm like, I can't keep putting this off. I got to do it. But because at some point we all die, and I don't want to die. I don't want to be like that guy that's like, let me be optimistic, 97 years old, going, I really wish I wrote that book. Yeah. Why didn't I take the time to do it? Screw that.
Yeah. If that 97-year-old guy was smart, he'd still do it.
Yeah.
There's still time. I mean, until he's in the grave.
We're guaranteed nothing. And so, I mean, at least I get to say, hey, I've recorded a couple records, or CDs or albums or EPs or songs, whatever, at some point in my life. And I got to play some really cool venues and had some really cool audiences and had those experiences. And then, to be able to, okay, cool, I got to do some films that, people got to see. It wasn't just I made this film and I screened it to the, whatever. I mean, the Heroin Effect was on PBS. We did it. Whoops, sorry about that. So, people got to see it. And then not, every once in a while I look at the report from, the distribution company that's handling it. And it's funny to see that it's, because it's available via, Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. And you get to see that there are places, New Zealand, Iceland, that have downloaded and watched your film. South Africa, Finland, Scandinavia, Denmark, it's just weird when you look at the map and you go, well, from a guy who didn't go to film school, made a film in New Hampshire, and to know that it's been, all over the U.S. and in Canada, but also, kind of on a global scale, in a sense, just kind of makes you go, that's just weird. And we live in a world today where that's possible. I know. So
we do.
It's a weird, I can't imagine what it's like for somebody like Dan Brown, who wrote this book, had an idea, wrote it down, put it out there, took off to the point where, it's such a, I want that for everybody. Every artist who I know who's put themselves out there I want them to be successful. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I don't think you can hammer that point too hard. What separates many people is somebody woke up and decided to do it. Yeah. They just had nothing to do with the idea being better than someone else's idea. They just decided to do it.
Yeah. And that's, it was...
That one step is huge. You don't think so, but...
Yeah, when David said that, I was like, you're right. It's that huge step, and it's not... It's just doing it. It's just... Right. And for some people, They'll never do it. They'll have the idea and they'll just never do it.
And they'll talk it and talk it and talk it.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
And for other people, it's like you can't not do it. And that's what happened to me with like the documentary. I'm like, I just remember being like, there was one instance that happened, and it gave me the idea to do the film. And I went home and I wrote 2 pages or 3 pages in a journal and outlined this, and I couldn't not do it. And every time I'd tell somebody about it, they're like, "That's a great idea," or there would be some other thing that was like, "Got to do it."
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did. I mean, it'd be great if it won an Oscar or an Emmy or whatever, but the reality is that, I looked at that film like, if I get to tell this story and it helps somebody, some family, somebody whose kid is struggling with addiction or does something, if it does that, if it has that kind of an impact, then cool. Then that's more than what I would have done just as a guy who had an idea sitting on a couch.
And you
know
never
what I mean?
know who's going to be impacted by it or what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And you cannot conceive. It's impossible to conceive who could be touched by that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm psyched that I got to do creative mornings after the film came out, after we kind of premiered it, and it was really it was cool to do. Like, I always like doing Q&As. Because I think you get to get a great idea of your audience or whatever. And when people sometimes ask, there was parents that brought their kids, and they had a kid who wanted to be a filmmaker, and they're like, well, we took him out of school today, and we brought him in here because, just to ask questions like, what's your word about it? I'm like, just do it. Nike can sue me for saying
Have
it.
that question on here. What would you say to the up and coming filmmaker?
Just do it. Like, if you want to do that, just do it. I mean, because what's the worst that's going to happen? The worst that's going to happen is you don't do it.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So just do it, because, not everybody's going to like it.
Even in failure, you learn.
Oh, that's how you learn.
Right.
I mean, it's not like you can use the Edison light bulb example, although did he really invent it, or was it Tesla? But anyways,
Don't start.
Sorry, that's just a funny story. You learn through that process, and I mean, the first thing, and even as a filmmaker, everybody goes, your first film, you're like, oh my God, I've done the great thing, and I did this film, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to win the awards, I'm just going to go out there, and then you do it, and you realize after you go, oh, okay, it's like a student film. and your ego goes into check or whatever, and you go, well, okay, well, but then you go, but well, I did it, so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I know it well because my wife and I built in our house a rocket mass heater, which is crazy kind of wood burning stove, but it involves adobe clay and everything. Mm-hmm. And along the way, I had kind of documented what we were doing, and one of the reasons was because I had to do a lot of research because I'm from New England. I know nothing about adobe clay. I know nothing about how it works. And so I figured maybe there are other people who don't know too, right? So I just kind of wrote down all these problems that we had and where I found the answers from. And I wrote a little booklet on it. And I published it out on Amazon like 4 years ago. That foolish little book kicks out $100 or so every month, like clockwork. And like what you were just saying, it's in Poland, it's in Ireland, it's in Hungary, Japan, Germany.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Who in the world is reading this thing?
People all over.
Right.
And that's, I mean, it's great if your goal is to set out and make a ton of money. It's even better if your goal is to set out and do something because you can't not do it, and then you make a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I think there's something to be said about that, or getting an award or an accolade or something like that for your effort. And I think that, there's something to be said about just putting yourself out there or doing it and making something that other people can identify with.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a much richer experience, right? Because you're doing it out of passion, you're doing it out of just fun, without any real expectations of what could happen. Right. And when it does happen, that feeling is just enriched that much more.
Yeah, it makes all the time that you spent, whether it was writing your booklet, right?
Yeah.
Publishing it and putting it on Amazon, or all the time, the countless hours in the editing studio, or the countless hours of like driving somewhere to go do an interview. And you're like, I don't know, what am I doing this for? I don't know if this is going to work out.
Right.
Is this even going to make it into the film? Or the amount of time you spent writing a scene over and over and over again, because what is it? The joke about writing is rewriting, and over and over and over. And then I think the worst thing is you write a script, you're like, this is great, and then you give it to actors, and then you go, I need to. That's better, And there's something about just that putting it, openness to do it and put it out there and getting it done, and then seeing that proliferation, and then in my book, it's like it's better to do that than, I'd rather do that and fail at it in a sense, or not fail, but do it and be able to say, okay, well, but I did it, versus go, God, I wish I would have done that. Yeah.
I don't know anything about Venn Creative, so is it a collaborative event? Are you by yourself? Is it you?
It's just me right now. I mean, I hope that it'll grow in time and be. But right now it's just an excuse for me to have just a company for me to be able to do content for corporations and stuff like that. But at some point, I imagine that it'll probably do a film, and it'll it's just that. There's something to be said about I talked to a friend of mine when I thought about doing it, and he was like, yeah, why wouldn't you do that? Of course you should do that. And I was like, well, yeah, but I don't even... And he actually said, well, why don't you just call it Venn Media? I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, because my last name is short, and it's sort of, if you know anything about the Venn diagram and whatever, you can... And he was like, well, that'd be a cool name for a media company. I'm like, yeah, and then I realized that was taken somewhere.
It's in the UK or somewhere, or Michigan or something.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. Yeah, no, there is. And then and so I was like, oh, well, what if I call it Venn? And the other thing is, like, Venn Media, the URL was astronomical. Oh. It was a couple $1,000s.
Really?
It was ridiculous.
For the domain?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
So I was like, oh, I'll throw creative in there because that's important.
It becomes $1.99.
Exactly. And I was like, okay, great. Cool, that worked. But yeah, no, it's just, I guess it's just a way for me to keep doing what I like doing, and hopefully it'll grow, but it's just
Are you able to make a living at it now, or do you have a side job that you do, or this is it? Good for you.
Yeah. It grew out of necessity too, because I'm a full-time single dad, and my son's going to be in high school next year.
Oh my God.
But I'm old.
It goes by fast.
It does. And but one of the things is I've always been very much involved. Like I never really wanted to be that person that was always traveling for work, or working 7 in the morning to 7 at night kind of thing. And I always wanted to have be able to be there, drop them off at school, whether it was dropping them off at daycare, or not have to have them in daycare every day, or being able to have a work schedule that worked around my life schedule, and have a really good work-life balance, and be able to go to all the games. I mean, I'm going to leave here today, and he's got a game tonight. Nice. He's pitching tonight. So, or at least I hope he is. He was sick this morning, not feeling all that great the last couple of days. But he was like, I'm going to... So I think he'll be fine. It's just a runny nose. But, it's that kind of thing where you're like, that work-life balance. I think it's important to be able to see, as a... I think it matters more to me as a parent. If I didn't have a kid and it was just me, I would have moved to LA and I would have done this and I could have done that. But I went about it differently. But what I learned is, like, okay, there's a great film community around here. There's a lot of people that appreciate film. Boston isn't far away at all. Yeah. And there's a great, tons of movies are filmed there now. Yeah. You don't have to be in LA anymore. I think that's kind of what has changed so much. I mean, if you want to be on the big featured film sets, and you need to be in LA, but if you want to be, an independent filmmaker that's making really good independent films, whether it's docs, whether it's just, other things, you can be in Atlanta, you can be in Vancouver, you can be in Boise, Idaho. I think that there's the way media is consumed now is so. I mean, you can be a content creator on YouTube, and other various platforms.
And there are kids who are doing it.
Absolutely,
kids.
yeah.
Kids.
So it's you can do what you want to do, and I think that there's a certain thing that's wonderful about the fact that it's kind of open to everyone now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's weird too to think about. Growing up, there was like 4 channels. Yeah. And so those were the only shows that you could watch. And then you look back on that time, and you're like, now there's so many shows, and I can't watch all the ones I want to watch, and I can wait till they come out on Netflix so I can binge watch them. We're all, or there's just nothing on TV. I mean, how many times do you hear people say, oh, there's nothing on TV? Oh, I just binge watch Netflix, or I just find movies on Netflix and watch those. Well, the great thing about that is it's made documentary films appealing again. Like reality television, I think really helped documentary filmmakers.
That's interesting.
Or at least,
it makes
sense. What I mean? It makes sense, and I hope so. So when I say, oh, God, I'll never do another doc again, I like doing them. I just have to find the right thing to do it again.
Yeah.
And I have a couple ideas that I've been like, well, maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah.
But, until... in each one of them, there's epic failures in each one that you learn from. That you go, okay, for the next one, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make a different set of mistakes now.
Right. yeah.
And hopefully the outcome is going to be good. But
you still like the film festival out in Portsmouth?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I always come. It's great. They still have wonderful panels. I always make a point to attend as many panels as I do films. They get good films. It's great to see.
It's alive. What's amazing to me is how alive it is.
Oh, it's. I mean, there's nothing. There's still, and you don't get to see it as many times. Like if you go to see a big budget Hollywood film, you don't hear applause at the end of the films. You do occasionally, but you don't. It's not like a live experience where like you go to the film festival, you see a great short, you see a great documentary, you see a great feature, you see a film that you may not have caught in the theaters because it's kind of smaller, independent, or has a limited release. But you see something that's really good, and you hear an audience react to it, collectively react to it, applaud for it. And then, I mean, at that film festival, the filmmaker or somebody who's seriously involved in the film comes out on stage and does a Q&A.
Yeah.
And, I love it. I remember, watching a film by a local guy LA filmmaker now, Austin Chick, and he had done a film a few years ago at the New Hampshire Film Festival that was called, I want to say Girls versus Boys or something to that effect. And I remember watching it, and it was a really interesting film. It wasn't what I expected. I think a lot of people were kind of like, whoa, this is a little bit more horror-ish than I had expected with this whole... And it was definitely had... And there was a term for it that he used, and I don't remember what it was, but it was great. And the Q&A thing, I think, because there were people that got up and left because they're like, I can't watch this scene. This isn't what I expected. Like, whoa. And the great thing was listening to the Q&A afterwards and listening to Austin explain, well, this is a whole genre of film. This is a style of film. People that like this genre love this kind of film. If you don't know about it and you don't like it, you're going to hate it. And there's people here that hate it. But, he made it. It's great. I don't know if I'd call it a great film. It's a really interesting film to watch. I remember it ending and me going, oh, okay, I know what that was. But not everybody, had the understanding of it. So it was one of those, David Fincher Fight Club moments where you're like, oh my God, it's what? So you have that kind of thing. Or Black Swan. I might be giving away films now that are, spoiler alert, that were done years ago. But, having those moments in a film where, an audience goes, oh, God! That's what's really going on here. And it's great, going back to this original point, is that you go to see that film, and you go, man, this isn't what I wanted, or what I expected, or what I thought I was seeing. But then you get to meet the filmmaker afterwards and have him explain certain choices about this is why that scene went the way it did. This is why it ended this is what that was. And you learn from it, as a fan of film. You know what I mean? Even if you're not a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Even if you just like movies. Like I always talk to people, and they're like, well, I'm not a musician. But I always laugh. I'm like, yeah, but you listen to music. I mean, music isn't just for musicians. Films aren't just for filmmakers.
Yeah. I had a guy in here a few weeks ago who, he's a DJ for doo-wop. And I was telling him what I love about summertime when music starts coming back out, the Beach Boy stuff, all the summertime music, is... they start talking about the story behind the song, the things that you don't know about, how a song came to be or what was involved in it. And that's what's really cool about the movie. You watch the movie, but you don't know necessarily what went into making that or that, like you said, that scene, that one particular moment in a film.
Yeah.
That to me, that's fascinating.
It's what makes film festivals great. And I mean, and by the way, I love the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
I've seen them like 11 times.
Have you really?
Oh, yeah. I grew up, my dad loved the Beach Boys. Endless Summer was my first vinyl record. I still to this day, Brian Wilson's a genius. Hands down. That's a great movie, too. The one that John Cusack played Brian Wilson in.
Yeah.
forgot the name of it, but it's great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved it. I mean, amazing. But knowing the stories behind the making of Pet Sounds, you know, or the Beach Boys, I mean, it's great. Just knowing that. I think that behind the things, getting a glimpse behind the curtain for a lot of people is a great thing about going to film festivals.
Yeah.
And, you know, for young aspiring filmmakers, I mean, the New Hampshire Film Festival, they have the aspiring, you know, young filmmakers workshop that Dan does.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you're just a kid and you want to go to the New Hampshire Film Festival, you'll be able to make a film and get it screened at the music hall at the end of the film festival.
Really?
Yeah, it's called the Young Filmmakers Workshop.
Now, how cool would that be?
It's very cool. Yeah. No. Dan, oh crap! It's not Dan. Dan, forgive me. I know too many Dans, and I'm going through all of them right now, and I'm failing.
The Rolodex is spinning.
Yeah, there is, and it's spinning. And I'm an awful person. Anyways, no. Oh, it's not Dan. Anyway, yeah. Not enough coffee today.
It'll come to you when you're.
It'll come to me when 5 minutes after we leave.
Or you're watching your son pitch tonight.
I'll look on my phone and be like, oh, it's. But my point being is, it's a great experience for kids that are interested in film to be able to get some firsthand knowledge about making a film. And Mac Edge, you know, Dan. There's another Dan. Dan lends the editing computers for kids to edit for that on. They, people are able to film on a couple of different cameras. I think PPM TV might be involved too.
Yeah.
I could be wrong on that. But if they're not, they should be.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, they go out and write a little short film. They have everybody, you know, they're broken up into teams. These kids all collaborate, write it, direct it, edit it, act in it, you know, and then in the end they get to screen it, and it's pretty cool.
Dang, yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, and I think I wish when I was a kid I could have done that, because maybe I would have made less music and more film.
Maybe,
you know.
What's your favorite piece of technology that you use now?
I mean, it's probably one. I guess it's editing software that's available now.
What do you use?
Adobe Premiere Pro.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me. Like, to think back that it wasn't that long ago that people were splicing film.
I know. And
to be able to say, wow. I mean, then again, I look back on the first time I was ever in a recording studio as a kid playing in a band, and it was a 1-inch tape or 2-inch tape machine you're recording to, and now it's all digital, and it's great. It's amazing to think of how much the costs have come down, and the fact that you can go out and buy a camera and you can shoot a film on it. If you want to have something with interchangeable lenses, you can get a DSLR that shoots 4K and it's going to look really good, and you can get different lenses that you're going to be able to just get a prime lens kit, even if you're just renting it from Rule, or you can even rent a camera, and you can do things much cheaper now than you could as little as 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Yeah. You know what I mean? And to think, 15 years from now, where is it going to be? What I mean? So that's why I guess it goes to storytelling. I always say and think that, it's like real estate agents, and they're like, oh, location, location, location. And I'm like, film is the same thing. It's just story, story, story. And at least I think that's what it should be. And I think the people that are the really good, content creators that are out there right now are using their personality in ways to tell story that is engaging and captivating to a large audience. And I think that for content creation, I think that's, when you've got somebody who's doing all that themselves, I think that that's what's working. I think, there's just a way to tell a story and just captivate an audience, and if you can do that.
Yeah. Do you have a contemporary here in New Hampshire who you love their work? You're like, oh my God, man, they just do such great stuff. Or are you your own contemporary? Your own, like, I'm it.
No, God, no. No, there's tons of, the thing is like, I think everybody, everybody that I know that's had films screened at the New Hampshire Film Festival or film festivals across the country, I got to meet some great people from LA who came out and screened a film called Squirrel this past year.
Oh yeah, didn't it? They had multiple showings. They had
they added a showing.
Yeah.
and I actually, became good friends with him to the point where I was like, hey, can you send me the link to that? Because I actually want to have a screening at my house for my son and some friends and neighbors.
Cool.
And we did that. We actually, but, Jordan Long was a great dude. So I think anybody who's making films and getting them out there, that's what it's about. I mean, I think that's how this whole community kind of. I think it's really great that everybody's kind of helpful to one another. And I think that there's a lot of people who are filmmakers around here that it's like, hey, I mean, Scott's a good friend. We met at the film festival.
Oh,
and we were neighbors. But when Scott and I met, it was just because we ran into each other at the film festival and we were just talking. And I was like, I have no idea who that dude is. Never met him before, never seen him before in my life. And then we just started talking, exchanged numbers. Then we realized we lived on the street away from each other. We're literally, I could throw a rock from my backyard and hit his window. So, but now he's in Austin, and
he'll be back. He'll be back.
They'll come back.
Yes. Exactly.
No, I mean he may, and if he does, then we'll do a film.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we've always said, you're whatever happens, and even if you're still in Austin or you end up in LA, I mean, like we'll do something for sure.
He's hot to do something in a horror genre.
Oh yeah, he has been for a long time. He's working on a doc right now. We were talking about it yesterday. His Love documentary. And,
this is breaking news. I knew nothing about it.
No, he's got a documentary idea, and he's talking about it. And we talked about it yesterday, and it'll be cool. It'll be great to see, and I'll go to wherever that premieres and support the hell out of that. Because I mean, I love when friends like it is. Again, it goes to that thing where tons of people have ideas, but write it down, do it.
Yeah.
Hold yourself accountable to it.
That's right. Like, just freaking do it.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
do we have anything else on that list?
I have a lot, but that's all I.
Did we run out of time? Did I talk too much?
No. This is written. It's just content. One last thing. If you were going to give a talk to a group of filmmakers, or would-be filmmakers, or wannabe filmmakers, what would your topic be? What would be? And maybe it is that just do it thing. But if you're going to give a TED talk, they invite you down to do it. What are you going to say?
I mean, I think that is there is something to be said about just do it. I mean, having that idea, like, when I have an idea that hits me and something I want to do, it like keeps me up at night. Like I lay in bed awake thinking about it. It's just constantly in the back of my mind. It's always going on, and I know I'm not the only one that has that. I'm not alone. And if you've got that thing that's going on in your head and putting it to paper and writing it down, or just being able, and then just getting to the point where you do it, and not expecting perfection, just getting it done to do it, just to satisfy that own creative voice in your head. But then I think, along the way, it allows you to collaborate with other people, which makes it better. You know what I mean? You can't do it all by yourself, even though sometimes you have to. If you've got somebody that's there to kind of rein you in a little bit, or help with direction, or just figuring out. But nowadays that there's so many different avenues. I would encourage anybody to do it, put it to paper. I mean, like I said, tons of friends who are really successful and on their way to even greater success, and it's because they did that, and you can't expect it instantly.
Do you ever have a time when you just kind of free will, where you just have friends over to kind of mull things over, or maybe a couple of friends are writers, or a couple of actors, or a couple of other filmmakers, and you're just like, let's just get together, we're gonna have a barbecue, a few beers, just shoot the breeze, see what happens? I
wish I did more. Scott and I used to kind of just do that because we were just neighbors, and we would be like, what would be cool? I think that's I think if you're in I think that's a great thing to do. Like, it's a great way to kind of hash out an idea and see what works and what doesn't work before you actually, pick up a camera and start shooting. I think it's that collaborative aspect of it, and it doesn't have to be, it's like it takes a writer director, or two people that are one writer, one director, a good idea for an editor and cinematographer. Just you could get a handful of great, talented people together, or mildly talented people. You know what I mean? But together they're amazing.
Yeah,
and being able to do that, I think, is a few years ago, and this is sort of diversion from this conversation, but I watched a really cool documentary called The Cutting Edge, not the skating movie, but it's about editors and directors working together and stuff like that. And they were talking to the woman who was Quentin Tarantino's editor and how she worked with him. And I just remember being, and sadly she had passed away after she had kind of been his only editor, I think, for his entire career up until that point. And she was able to but it's one of those things, you realize, behind every, great director is this editor who was able to, so it just kind of shows that collaborative process. So, I mean, I think if I could have a barbecue and get a lot of my friends together that are, my problem is that they're all over the place, and it's not as easy, but...
and Skype's not as much fun.
No, there's something to be said about just sitting there and listening to somebody say something, and then you can look back at it and be like, God, you're a genius, or what the...
Yeah, right.
You can't do
shut
that,
up.
or whatever, but... no, I just... I think it's... that collaborative aspect is huge. And I also think that the one other piece of advice, going back to everything, is good audio makes or breaks a film.
Yeah, touch on that.
So
that's the second time you've said it, so flesh that out. What's the problem here?
If you don't get good audio, you can't hide bad audio. It just ruins everything. If you don't have good audio, you're screwed.
And what's bad audio sound like? I mean, people know it, but what...
I mean, whether it's tinny, whether there's wind noise, whether there's little crackles, whatever it is, but however you're recording it, be super anal about the audio. If you're going to spend money, if you've got $500 to spend on a film, and you're like, okay, where do we spend our money? Okay, $400 goes to the audio guy. That's how important audio is. In that scenario, because it's
you can't clean it up.
You can't clean it. Once it's done and you've yelled cut and you're sitting there and you go, oh, you can reshoot stuff. You can figure out ways around bad footage. You can always do something. Or if in a documentary, if you're watching a documentary and there's a really compelling scene, but it's kind of grainy and crappy looking, but there's good audio, you can get away with it.
Yeah.
If you're watching something that's got bad audio in a beautiful scene, you notice the audio is bad.
Yeah.
So...
and it takes you right out.
Pulls you right out. You're like, wow, this is an amateur hack.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, and you can clean that stuff up as much as you want and try and stuff like that. And there's tons of ways to try to remove wind noise and try to do this and boost that. And then all of a sudden you just get digitized audio.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Spend your time making sure you've got good audio. That's on the Car Guru shoot, we do those all the time. Conditions aren't always perfect. They're outside, getting good audio, because nobody's going to watch those 20, 30, 40,000, 100,000 views. Nobody's going to watch them if the audio is bad.
Yeah.
So,
and you just can't clean it in the editing room. You just can't clean it up enough.
Nope. So make sure you're getting good audio. And I think that is one of those things that I feel like every filmmaker has gone through. Oh yeah, charge your batteries, carry spares, stuff like that. But there's really, it's like this weird overlooked thing that people go, oh, you're making a film, it's a film.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but you got to watch it and listen to it too.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing a silent film.
Your silent film. Yeah.
But it's like a silent musical, so I guess.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Not a musical so much. There's music in it. So it doesn't make it silent. There's just no dialogue. I guess it's a dialogue-free film.
Got ya.
How's that?
Got ya. Dialogue-free.
I really tried to adopt that show, don't tell aspect of script writing.
Oh, nice.
And I just remember reading a book at one point, and that point being
It'll be interesting to see if you can get the story out properly.
Yeah. And see, now I've said this in some public fashion, so I feel like, kind of have to do it. We'll see. It'll get out there. But
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know.
So anybody has an idea or anybody wants to get in touch with you, what do they do?
VennCreativeMedia@gmail.com. It's my email. It's easy to get get in touch with me that way. I'm on Facebook.
Kind of ish. I'm out there.
I'm out there. Facebook. Those are out there.
Out there.
Twitter, it's Michael S. Venn, like at Michael S. Venn on Twitter. But yeah, it's... And do as many roles as you can. Like, if you want to do film, like, that's the other thing, you know, I joke about, like, I've PA'd on a film, written, directed, acted, produced, edited, scored. You know what I mean? Just do it all. Like, if you
need to do that.
Because you have to, you know, it's really difficult if you're like, you know, if you're like asking somebody, like, if you're a director and you're like, you know, you need to do this. Well, but if you've been in that situation, you know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're... Probably the only thing I've never done is like held a boom mic because I'm not tall enough. That's my excuse. I'd probably get tired.
So if somebody wanted to do that stuff, if somebody wanted to help out on a film and do something, where would they go to even find out where it's happening? Is there a site?
I don't know. I mean, there's got to be forums and stuff like that. I mean,
I know there's New England Film.
There's New England Film. There's Boston Casting if you're an actor and you want to see what's available for extras and, you know, fairly local. You can go and do that. Small parts and stuff. They're always casting people.
Yeah, but you could be a PA or anything through them, right?
You can, a PA through, there's a ton. I mean, just start asking. Just start looking around. You know,
do it.
Just do it. I don't know. There's one thing. If you listen to the very beginning of this and you're like, go to the very end, and then you can just sum up the whole thing. Like, just go do it.
Yeah, right. Hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Just go do it.
Yeah. Swoosh. Yeah. We soon.
I feel like Nike's. Yeah.
Well, they hit it.
They did.
It's brilliant. All right, my friend.
Cool.
Thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're fun.
And there you have it. Another great one in the tank. That one's going off to the memorial. Have a great day.